The religious like to claim that they have proof of their silly beliefs, but it's amazing that none of them can actually present any of it. Why? Because they don't really know what proof is, of course. It's all just confirmation bias. They start with comforting beliefs, then they look for anything that they can hold up that confirms their already existing beliefs. They're just cherry picking. It's why we spend so much time shaking our heads sadly. Here's a church channel called Time of Grace Ministry, led by Pastor Mike, and he's convinced that he has proof that God exists. Except he has no clue what proof actually entails. Very few theists do, because they're really not concerned with actual proof, only with whatever shiny things they can hold up in front of their congregations to distract them while the collection plates are passed around. It's also why, once again, they like to talk about atheists, but they sure don't want to talk to any actual atheists who are just going to point out what's actually going on. And that's why I'm here, because I'm not afraid to expose the stupidity that's going on up on stage. So let's watch Pastor Mike explain why he knows God is real and why Pastor Mike is embarrassingly wrong.
How do you know that God is real?
That's a good question. How do you know that? Because it's the religious zealots who make that claim, and none of them have any actual evidence for their claims. They just present feelings and faith and books of absurd mythology. They don't have anything actually objective or demonstrable or independently testable. That's rather odd. So please, tell us how you know God is real. Be specific. This ought to be good.
If you never wrestled with that, I'm not sure if you thought deeply about it, huh? Lots of us were raised just believing that there is a God, but God is unique in the fact that he is spirit. Jesus said that in John chapter 4, God is spirit. So you can't necessarily see him or talk to him. So what makes God different than all these other characters of fantasy? How do we know for sure?
You keep asking good questions, but I don't think you have any good answers. And one of the mistakes you're making up front is you care what it says in the Bible without being able to demonstrate that the Bible is objectively reliable. Now, that's really common, but it's because it is so common that I don't think the religious stop to ask themselves if it's warranted. Just because you've been told that you have to have faith or that you have to believe what the Bible says, that doesn't mean that you ought to have faith or believe what the Bible says. You have to have good reasons to do either. Do you? Let's see.
The Bible would give 2, if not 3, really concrete answers to that question.
Now, I know he's going to go on and just read Bible verses, but he still hasn't shown that the Bible is worthwhile as a source, and that's a problem. Until you can show that there is a good, rationally based reason why the Bible is actually true, why should we take anything it has to say in the Bible seriously? Not faith, not belief, not wishful thinking. Proof. Where is the proof? Where is the knowledge that you say that you have? And this is where it all starts to go downhill.
The first would be in the book of Romans. So Romans chapter 1, verse 20. It admits that God is invisible.
It doesn't admit anything. It makes an unwarranted claim. How do you know that what it says in the Bible is true? How do you know that whoever wrote the Bible, and keep in mind that the vast majority of the Bible was written anonymously, you've got no clue who wrote most of the books, but how do you know that any of these anonymous people had any clue what they were talking about? Faith doesn't get you to fact. You have to do better than that.
But it says this. Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made.
Prove it. That's really what all of this comes down to. Prove that the claims made in the Bible are true. Because if you can't, then nobody has any rational reason to believe it. That's why the religious only preach to the choir. Because the choir isn't going to ask any of these hard questions. They aren't going to question their blind faith. It makes them feel good, so they're just going to cling to it, no matter how irrational and unsupportable it is. Those who don't buy into it already, well, we need more. But you don't want to talk to us, do you?
So God would say, look at the complex world that we live in, and you will see evidence that God is real.
What does that even mean? God says what? How do you know God says anything? How do you know God is real in the first place? God has to do a lot better than that. Funny how he doesn't even try, huh?
Sometimes this is called the watchmaker theory. If you were walking through the woods and you saw a watch laying there in the ground, you would not assume, the winds just blew enough times over the right angles and dirt assembled, and there's a watch. You'd say, no, this is so complex, someone had to handcraft this.
No, because we know that people make watches. We have that experience. But if you took a watch out into the middle of deepest, darkest, whatever, where the people had never seen a watch and they had no experience that watches were made by people, they'd look at it and not know where it came from. They might even assume that their gods made it. Why? Because their ignorance doesn't allow them to come up with a better conclusion, any more than the ignorance of people like Pastor Mike here does. So, not understanding how things really happened, they cling to an emotionally comforting conclusion that makes no sense whatsoever in reality. Welcome to creationism, people. It's even stupider than it sounds.
And Paul is saying here in Romans chapter 1, if you look at the world around us, if you get pregnant and you see how this child develops and how beautiful and complex it is, if you study the forces of the universe and gravitational pulls and constants and gravity, if you see that the world, like life existing, is this crazy miracle that should never happen, it's so complex that the only logical thing to think is someone must have made this.
And you're wrong, laughably so, because this is the blind leading the blind, the ignorant leading the ignorant, the emotionally stunted leading the emotionally stunted. That's really the basis of religion. I don't get it, therefore God did it. But that's not a rational way of looking at things. People get emotionally invested in their beliefs. Then, when we find the real answers, and we have found the real answers in this case, they don't want anything to do with it because it gets in the way of their comfort. They choose the illusion over the reality. And then they look at us like there's something wrong with us. Go figure.
There must be something bigger than people just like me. There must be a God.
Says who? Just because you want to believe that there is, that doesn't mean that there is. This is really just the argument from ignorance fallacy. You don't like the real answers, so you rely on your ignorance to come up with answers that you do like, even if they're laughably untrue. I really don't know how to express the utter stupidity of that. It's where all of this just falls apart. It doesn't matter what you feel. It ought to matter what you can reason, and reasoning doesn't really matter to the religious. We know better than that, but they don't care. They're too busy singing, feelings, nothing more than feelings. It just gets in the way of the facts.
And the Bible's second answer to that question actually comes on the next page in my Bible, Romans chapter 2, verse 14. It says that people who didn't grow up with the Bible, maybe they've never read it, they somehow know this difference between right and wrong, which is sometimes called the argument from moral standards or moral absolutes.
Which is yet another logical fallacy that the religious fall into. They don't understand how morality works, and they really just don't care. Morals don't come out of a book. They come from us. They come from humans. We make them up, and then we refine them because some moral standards work better than others. It's a constant game of change and improvement. That's something that you just can't get from religion because, by definition, nothing in religion can change. It was handed down from on high, and therefore it can never be altered. And that's why religious morality is so heinous and disgusting.
So if we would all agree that it's wrong for me to walk up to someone here in the front row and punch them square in the face, the question would be, well, why would we all think that?
I don't know, especially since in the Bible, God ordered the Israelites to murder men, women, children, and animals for no defensible reason whatsoever. That's religious morality for you. Genocide is one of God's favorite pastimes. But if you want a real answer to that, and this is why secular morality is far superior to anything that comes out of religion, it's because of enlightened self-interest. We don't want to get punched in the face, so we don't go around punching other people in the face, in hopes that they won't do it to us. We treat others well because we want to be treated well. That's the basis of all morality, even the morality of the vast majority of theists. Enlightened self-interest combined with empathy makes the world a much better place. That is, until you crazy religious people come along and think your imaginary friend commanded you to kill people that you don't like and throw gay people off of roofs and deny them basic human decency. Yeah, that's moral. You people are monsters.
Unless there was something wired in us by God himself.
No, something wired in us by millions and millions of years of evolution. Humans are social creatures. Things that make us more likely to survive and thrive remain in our genes. It's unfortunate that, because the religious breeds so fast, harmful things like religiosity haven't quite been edited out yet. But it's coming.
This is where people who don't believe in God get into all sorts of problems because they know that there's a difference between right and wrong. They'll call racism or the abuse of a child wrong, but if there is no God, then that's not wrong. That's just your opinion.
Yes, it is. Just like believing in a God is your opinion. But unlike your imaginary friend, we have human society to thank for codifying working moral attitudes into laws and other social conventions. We all collectively agree that some things ought to be acceptable and other things shouldn't be. It isn't some imaginary man in the sky calling the shots. It's us. The people who are not only affected by these decisions, but the only ones that are actually real enough to make them in the first place.
But if there is a God who created us, a God who loves what's good and he hates what's evil, then there would be this moral code embedded in our heart.
That's your claim. That's all it is. Because you not only haven't proven that any of it is true, you haven't established that there's a God in the first place. It's why you people fail so badly. You're all standing at the starting line, declaring victory before you've done any actual work, while the rest of us are all standing around at the finish line, wondering what you're all on about. I'm not interested in your ifs. I'm interested in your facts. And it's really too bad that you don't seem to have any.
So whether it's the argument from design in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, the argument from our conscience in Romans 2, verse 14, or just the incredible things that God has done throughout history, as in the story of Jesus 2,000 years ago.
All things that you have no evidence for whatsoever. Just because you desperately want those things to make any sense, that doesn't mean that they do. You can sit there and repeat your irrational beliefs until you're blue in the face. It doesn't get you one step closer to making them make any sense at all. All of the wishes and dreams in the world don't get you to the truth. The truth requires evidence, and sorry to say, you have none. And that's pretty pathetic when you think about it.
There's plenty of proof that we're not dumb for believing there's something more than just this world. There is a God who exists.
And where is that proof? Present it for independent and objective verification. Let us know when you can, because the things you tend to toss out there are laughably absurd. A book of mythology, a lot of unproven and unsupportable claims, and blind faith. Where is the proof? None of that qualifies. You have to do a lot better than that. And that's the problem. They can't. Claims aren't proof. Faith isn't proof. Books aren't proof. Proof is proof. Evidence is proof. Independently testable, objectively verifiable evidence is all that we're going to accept, and that's the one thing they entirely lack. But they can't admit it, which is why they really don't want to talk to us. They only want to huddle around a quick-talking shyster, many of whom actually know that what they're saying is nonsense, but because it makes them money, honesty is overrated. Now, I'm not saying that Pastor Mike here knows that he's full of crap. He might believe it. It still doesn't make any of it real, though. That's the point that I keep trying to get across, and the point that the religious pointedly ignore. Because truth doesn't mean a thing to them. Only feelings do. And you know who that's true of? Children. Immature children. Are we seeing a parallel yet? Because I sure am.
Bum